Hello, my name is Margaret Tucker, and I am teaching the unit Where We Live in a first grade class. So during this unit, students will be exploring our Earth through multiple activities and cover the 7 continents, specific countries, our state, and our community. They're going to be acquiring a variety of skills in order to demonstrate their understanding of geography, of the world in which we live, on a local, national, and global scale, including the distribution of people, places, and environments over the Earth's surface. So during this specific lesson, students will be able to partition geometric representation of the Earth's surface to determine the size of each continent in relation to one another. Students will probably have trouble comparing the equal parts. So during the lesson, students will determine and compare the size of the continents using small cutouts, but I'll get into that in a bit. The concept of the part of a whole is a challenging one to master, especially for early childhood students. The geometric representation will help the students separate pieces and compare their quantities. Students who are struggling with this concept can always rely on their knowledge of addition to compare the quantities. So it sounds like a lot of big vocabulary, but we'll get into what the activity actually entails. The lesson is going to start off with a read aloud of the book Where Is My Continent? It's a nonfiction book written by Robin Nelson, and the activity will provide the students with an opportunity to become familiar with the vocabulary used throughout the lesson. So as I read the book, I will make a list of all the continents and their names so we can revisit and have a discussion after the book has been read. As a class, we're going to label our world map. So in the classroom, we have a big, gigantic world map that's laminated so the students can go and write on it with dry erase boards, but for the read aloud, I'm going to write on it myself as the students participate. We're going to label the 7 continents, the 4 major oceans, the northern and southern hemispheres, and the equator. I might ask the students, does anybody know what continent we live on? Or how about what ocean we swim in? I'm sure the students will come back with stories about maybe they've traveled to a different ocean, maybe they haven't, maybe they might call the ocean the beach, but we're going to explore what they know so I have a better understanding going further into the lesson. So we're going to compare the continents using geometric representation as our main math activity. So I'm going to be using cardstock. I had printed out a copy of it and I had left it at work, so we're going to have to use our imagination for this. I printed out cardstock, a flat representation of the globe, and each student has their own copy. It's on a legal size piece of paper, so it's large enough for the students to kind of manipulate. And there's also our classroom gigantic map. They're actually going to compare their maps to that one at the end of the activity. Each continent is printed in a different color, and the flat globe has been transferred to grid paper that is sectioned off by 1 square inches. So the cardstock has been cut into 1 by 1 inch squares. So if you can see, I cut them out so you guys can get a better understanding. The students will be using the geometric representation of the continents to compare the amount of square inches each continent is to its whole. So say there are 100 1-inch squares total. How many squares represent Asia if Asia is green? So we'll pretend that these are green, and the whole class will know that there will be 100 squares total. So Asia will be printed green on their paper, and they'll have green 1-inch cutout squares, and they're going to have to fill the continent with all of their squares. If there are 100 1-inch squares total, how many squares represent Europe if Europe is purple? There are 100 1-inch squares total. How many squares represent North America if North America is red? And so on and so forth. And the students will fill in each printed continent with its matching color and be able to use these squares as a representation of the size of each continent. Comparing the size of each continent, the students will use their recorded data to compare the size of each continent in comparison to the next one. So they'll use their knowledge of integers, and students will put the countries in order from largest to smallest. So Asia will be 30 squares total, and Africa 20 squares, North America 16 squares, South America 12 squares, and Antarctica 9 squares, Europe 7 squares, and Australia 6 squares. And what they're going to have to do is understand that from 30 all the way down to 6, all the integers that lie in between are going to have to be put into numerical order. For the students who have acquired the skill quickly, which there are many first graders who would be able to do this activity just like that, they'll be given an opportunity to set up fractions to represent each continent. So for example, Asia would be 30 squares. They would put 30 over 100. After we've completed that whole activity, we're going to fill in our gigantic class map, and every student can self-assess and kind of see how many squares on our gigantic class map compared to their map. And we're going to wrap up the lesson by having the students go back to their tables, and they're going to pretend to fly to the continent of their choosing. So they will individually write a postcard from back home, so printed out, pre-printed postcards. And they're going to have to write a minimum of 4 sentences, and they're going to be describing their continent without mentioning it in their writing, using general direction and descriptive vocabulary. So students will swap their postcards with their table buddy after reading each other's postcards, that they will try to guess where their partner flew based on the description that they wrote in the postcard. So, for example, I'm going to post an example up on the board for the students because they might have a hard time writing those 4 sentences without actually mentioning the continent in their writing. And multiple postcards will be provided just in case the student accidentally mentions it. And me and the TA will go around and make sure that they don't slip up and give it away. So I'll put the example. I am one of the largest continents in the world. I am directly south of Europe. I am more than twice the size of Antarctica, but not as big as Asia. Can you guess where I am? And the answer will be Africa. And the students are going to have to use some time to kind of decode each of their buddies' postcards. Once they're done, they're going to flip over their buddy's postcard, and they will draw the continent and its surroundings on the front of their postcard using green and blue crayons. This activity is going to motivate the students for the upcoming lesson while also acting as a retention activity from the previous lesson. And while sitting on the rug, we're going to have a summary activity of an inflatable ball that I have blown up. That's printed as the globe. And we're going to toss the inflatable ball from one student to the next, and the student who catches the globe must answer the questions with regards to where his or her right thumb lands on the globe. What continent or ocean is your thumb on? Is your thumb on the northern or southern hemisphere? And name a continent smaller than the one your thumb is on. So, although our whole unit has kind of been geography-based, there are so many integrations of math lessons here, and this lesson is actually going to scaffold into the next lesson coming up, and it's going to be talking about population based on the size of each continent and the size of each country as we get further and further into the unit. So we're going to go back and use these unit squares and our representation to be able to compare the population size to the size of each country. So it's a great way to introduce fractions, introduce geometric representation to the students, and it's also a fun and friendly way just because all the continents are color-coded and they're able to match them themselves, and they don't actually have to come in with a prerequisite of addition, but it would really benefit them and they can even go further for a challenge. So I hope you enjoyed my lesson, and I can't wait to hear some of your feedback.